AGC2025.
My views and experience in that. Okay, and I will start with very classical work that Professor Prasun did in the 50s when he was involved in economic planning. So, he was the architect for second 5-year plan. Okay, and there is always a very interesting question: who was the architect of the first 5-year plan? Okay, so we ask this question to the students, and the students are always very confused. The answer is that nobody. Okay, because it was done in a haste, and there was a committee. Prasun himself was a member of the committee, but nobody was happy with the output of the first 5-year plan. That's why Prasun was given the responsibility. Now, one of the primary objectives that Prasun put in focus at that time was studying how economic planning is helping poor people to come to a higher economic level. Okay. And he looked at some very simple procedures. Okay. So around the same time, in the 50s, the National Sample Survey System was being launched, and it evolved over time. So they planned different household surveys, and based on the consumer expenditure and consumption data, they are trying to see how the population is progressing in terms of their economic status. And they looked at very simple things like you look at if you look at the total expenditure of a household, what percentage of that goes to food? If that percentage is very high, that's an indication that the household is probably very poor, because food is a very basic necessity, and if most of your expenditure is on food, then you cannot afford other things. Okay? So he started with these simple ideas, and then there were various rounds of survey, and then he was looking at how things were changing over time. Okay? Whether that percentage of households were spending, say, something like more than 50% of their expenditure on only food, whether that percentage is increasing or decreasing. So those were very basic and elementary ideas that he was working on. Okay. But then things have changed, and now we deal with more complex definitions of poverty and more complex measures. So there is a concept of MPI. There's a multidimensional poverty index that we now use, and that is based on health, education, and the standard of living. Now in the health, they use different indicators like infant mortality, which already people were talking about, and nutrition. Now in education, there are various parameters related to schooling, like whether a household has people who have gone to colleges, or whether they have completed school and things like that. And then in the standard of living, people look at whether what kind of cooking fuel they are using, whether they have good sanitation in the house, and whether they have good drinking water supply, use of electricity, etc. Various parameters. Okay. So these are the basic indicators or parameters that one has to collect data on, but it becomes a big challenge when you really try to collect data on that. And Chakraborti is right from the 50s, they were also looking at various indicators similar to these, and the biggest challenge was designing survey. And so for a statistician, the biggest challenge here is to design a survey, to generate the data, and then drawing inference from that.
Now, firstly, Reserve Bank does a lot of activities which affects economy in many ways, but none of them are meant for directly to alleviate poverty, because there are schemes which government has, like employment generation schemes and all. They are meant for poverty alleviation. But what Reserve Bank does, basically, which one of our earlier governor called as a full service central bank, which means that anywhere in the world, whatever activity central bank does, each and every activity RBI does. Even RBI does something more which is not called as a quote-unquote core central banking activity like financial inclusion, which is a very important part of alleviating poverty. And in fact, I think that that's one of the important aspect of or activity of central bank or RBI, which is more directly aligned to alleviating poverty. I will talk about each of these different work area of central bank or activity of RBI where we are using this using data. Actually, RBI using data since long. I mean, Probal talked about some work which was done in 50s during Professor Maulanabi's time. I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give you some flavor of different activity of central banking and how that data is helping us to discharge the activity. Now, starting with monetary policy, I mean, just to give you a background, because I see a lot of students here, monetary policy is basically to achieve price stability, which is a given, predetermined level of inflation. For us now, it is the framework which we use is inflation targeting framework, and where 4% inflation of all India CPI has to be attained in the medium term, keeping in mind the objective of growth. Now, this framework requires forecasting. It's a very important part of this framework is that you have to have reliable forecast which you can use to make the policy making. Now, because of this data, there are different types of models we use. Traditional time series models have been in use for quite a long period of time. But what we have done in recent past, maybe last 5-6 years, a little more than that, we have started using different machine learning algorithms, and we have found that for nowcasting and a short-term forecasting, these models have provided some kind of better forecast performance for a period of time. We cannot say that it always does best, but there are some models which are doing better than general traditional time series models. And on top of that, what we've seen is that if you combine multiple model forecasts, which Provalda was talking about ensemble modeling. If we find that if you do a combination of different forecasts, that has generally outperformed individual forecast of a model.
And that Dr. Mitra had stressed that there is a shift in the way things are getting done because new algorithms are in place from the traditional forecasting models. Now he spoke about ensemble forecasting. So there are many developments in the ensemble forecasting world. Earlier, the time series used to be straight away forecasted with taking into account different, statistical goodness of it, like heteroscedasticity and so on. Now they are splitting the time series into empirical modes, and now after splitting the time series into further sub-time series, now they are again ensembling it to forecast the future. And as he said, that ensemble methods, maybe this one or some other method, are proving to be strong. He also highlighted about the way the data needs to be collected if the real data is not available. That means use of proxy variable or proxy data, like the example he gave of the luminosity of a particular region. Higher the lightning, greater the time the city looks lighted, higher is the GDP. That's the kind of correlation that they have identified. Of course, now in today's world, that can also question the sustainability of the economy in the long run, because more you burn electricity, more you are unsustainable. And secondly, people are now shifting from white lights to yellow lights. So if yellow lights look dimmer, that will not mean that they are the GDP-wise poor. May not mean, I do not know. Such research has to be carried out. And finally, he spoke about that yes, there is a plethora of opportunity for anyone in the data science, because in data science, the most important challenge is that we do not get data to work upon. So then the RBI website, there are a lot of data, and you can start using your techniques, data mining techniques that you learn over a period of time, starting from simple statistical methods to the most complex ones, like the data mining technique that Professor Dinesh Kumar was talking about in terms of the decision tree, logistics regression, random forest, and then try to implement to see the accuracy of the models. So, but now comes the question that what are the companies or the bread earners doing? For example, the corporates. So we have with us Mr. Prasun Nandy from PwC partner. Now I would request him to say about how do they go ahead in collecting, collating, compiling and interpreting the data for corporate planning, and if they have any project that they have done with regard to economic and poverty alleviation.
The main premises of what we are trying to discuss in this topic lies in the inequalities, and in all sense. I might focus more on the inequalities of the data availability, but the inequalities are there in all sense. We just had another session where we focused on understanding the healthcare. We talked about financial inclusions, we talked about planning. I think as we try to move ahead and try to alleviate the poverty from this country, we need to move towards a world where many of our initiatives should be towards removing the inequalities that are there in healthcare, in financials, in education, and so on. I will take a step back and try to paint the picture of what this country, India, is looking like in terms of that data availability. We are a nation of 1.4 billion people. We just heard a little bit of glimpse about what NPCI has done to us during the COVID times. It actually meant that a lot of our transactions are digital today, which means that our ability to harness and use that particular data set to create a lot of insights, to make a lot of decisions, to give that as an input to policy makings have been greatly increased. Of course, this will mean that a lot of economic transformation that we are trying to do is currently being data driven. A lot of innovations that are happening today is obviously on the basis of the data that is available today. In the past, we have relied a traditional method of survey, but if you look at today, at least in the corporates, we are seeing that the new age organizations are very looking forward to leapfrogging in terms of using the data. The traditional method of data collection, like a survey method or a questionnaire method, is always there, always challenging, and we heard from Professor that how it is complex in terms of getting the data. But look at it from the other angle. Today you have quick commerce. Many of us in this room and beyond use something called quick commerce. It's nothing but the Blinkits and Zomato and Swiggies of the world. You know what we are doing? We are putting in lot of information into a database. Now, the government's initiative to try and make use of that data will mean that now we have much more accurate information instead of going through the traditional method of collection of the data and survey, and that is what we in PwC are also experiencing. I just wanted to share one little initiative that government of Uttarakhand did in terms of trying to work towards alleviating poverty. One means of doing that is through creating employment or bettering the living standard by pushing in or putting more transactions happening in that economy. What we did is to help the government to set up in their terms, it's like a startup, but that startup it was set up to create an environment for the local aspiring entrepreneurs to try and come and learn how to make better business than they are currently doing today.
AGC 2025, where data meets sustainability.